Family betrayal hits differently when it happens on Christmas. My own flesh and blood, my trusted son-in-law, the secret he kept in that garage, it changed everything between us forever. My hands trembled as I dialed 911 that night, standing in my daughter's garage, surrounded by evidence I never should have found. I whispered into the phone, "Please hurry. I think my family's in danger." The dispatcher asked if I was safe, but how could I be? The man I'd welcomed into our family 7 years ago, the father of my grandchildren, was someone I didn't recognize anymore. And what I discovered in that garage, I still have nightmares about it. I'm Loretta Gaines, 63 years old, born and raised in Georgia. Christmas has always been sacred in our family. Every year since losing my Thomas, I've carried on our traditions. The honey-glazed ham, sweet potato pies cooling on windowsills, gospel music playing softly in the background. But Christmas 2022 was different. My daughter Danielle insisted on hosting at her house for the first time. "Mama Loretta, you deserve a break," she said. I should have seen the worry lines around her eyes, should have noticed how her voice cracked when she said it. That night started with hugs and laughter. My grandkids, Melanie and Ty, performed their little Christmas play. Tobias, my son-in-law, carved the turkey with that charming smile that fooled everyone. The house glowed with twinkling lights, perfectly wrapped presents stacked under the tree. Then my chest tightened. At first, I thought it was just my heart acting up again. I excused myself, saying I needed some air. Nobody paid much attention. They were busy passing around dessert plates. The crisp December air hit my face as I stepped outside. That's when I noticed the light on in the garage. And that moment, that single decision to turn the doorknob, would tear my family apart. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. A stranger counting stacks of cash, duffel bags lined up against the wall, and that black case with its latches open, revealing rows of what were clearly illegal firearms. The stranger's head snapped up. Our eyes locked. Then the side door burst open and there stood Tobias. The mask slipped from his face for just a second, enough for me to see the truth. "Mama Loretta, you should be inside with family." Family. The word hung between us like a twisted joke. What would you have done in that moment? When the person your daughter married, the father of your grandbabies, looks at you with eyes warning you to keep quiet. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is. Would you have walked away and pretended not to see? Or would you have done what I did? Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe to hear the whole story of betrayal that unfolded that night. You'll want to know how deep this deception went. Also, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Because what I discovered after making that 911 call was even worse than what I saw in the garage. The truth about my daughter stunned me more than anything else. I should have known something wasn't right with Tobias from the beginning. 7 years ago, when Danielle first brought him home, he came bearing gifts, a bouquet of fresh flowers for me, an expensive bottle of bourbon for Thomas's memory, and that $1 million smile that charmed everyone. Too perfect, if you ask me now. "He's in real estate development, Mama," Danielle had said, her eyes bright with something I mistook for love. "He's buying up properties all over the county." Thomas had been gone just 2 years then. Cancer took him quick, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Left me alone in our family home where we'd raised Danielle, where we'd planned to grow old together. My daughter was all I had, besides my church community. Tobias courted her like something from an old movie. Fancy dinners, weekend trips, jewelry I knew she couldn't afford on her HR salary. They married after just 8 months. Too fast, but who was I to judge? Thomas and I had only waited 6. The grandkids came soon after that. First Melanie with her curious eyes, always asking questions about everything. Then little Ty, the spitting image of my late husband, right down to that dimple in his left cheek. Those children became my heartbeat. From the outside, they were the perfect family. Danielle got promoted at her company. Tobias's business kept expanding, new developments, more properties, bigger houses. 3 years ago, they moved into that sprawling home in the gated community, all stone and glass and manicured hedges. But sometimes when Tobias thought nobody was looking, I'd catch something in his eyes. A coldness, a calculation. The way he'd check his phone and step outside to take calls during family dinners. How he changed the subject when anyone asked too many questions about his business. "Don't be suspicious, Mama," Danielle would say when I tried to voice my concerns. "You're just not used to how business works nowadays." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just an old woman stuck in the past, but Thomas taught me something important during our 40 years together. Trust your gut, because it'll speak the truth before your mind can catch up. When Danielle called in early December to insist on hosting Christmas, her voice had a strange edge to it. "Are you sure, baby? You know I don't mind cooking," I said. "Please, Mama, I want to do this for you, for the family." There was something desperate in her tone that I didn't understand then. I arrived at their house on Christmas Eve with my car packed full of side dishes and presents. The house looked like something from a magazine. Wreaths on every window, lights outlining the roof, a towering Christmas tree visible through the front window. Tobias answered the door in that red cashmere sweater, the one that probably cost more than my monthly pension. He exclaimed, "Mama Loretta!" arms wide open. "Let me help you with those bags." But something felt off from the moment I arrived. Tension hung in the air like the scent of pine. Danielle hugged me too tight, held on too long. The children seemed subdued, especially Melanie, who usually couldn't stop talking about school projects and dance recitals. When I asked her what Santa was bringing, she just shrugged. "Dad says we might not do big presents this year. He says we need to be, what was it, Dad?" "Practical," Tobias answered quickly, shooting her a look. "Teaching the kids financial responsibility, right, honey?" He squeezed Daniel's shoulder just a little too hard. That night, as I unpacked in the guest room, I heard them arguing in hushed tones down the hall. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm of their voices pulled me enough. Urgent, heated, afraid. I went to bed wondering what was really happening in my daughter's perfect house. By morning, I'd have my answer and wish I'd never found it. Christmas morning came with forced smiles and carefully wrapped presents. The children tore through gift after gift, expensive toys, designer clothes, electronics that cost more than my first car. So much for financial responsibility. Tobias spent most of the morning on his phone, stepping into his office between gift openings. Each time he returned, his smile seemed more strained, his jokes more hollow. "Business never stops, even on Christmas, right, Tobias?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Real estate is always moving, Mama Loretta," he replied with a wink. "Gotta stay on top of it." Danielle kept glancing at him, her fingers fidgeting with her necklace, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. Something was wrong between them. I could feel it, as surely as I could feel the arthritis in my knees when rain was coming. By afternoon, the kitchen bustled with activity. Danielle and I prepared the turkey, while Tobias entertained the kids. On the surface, everything appeared normal, Christmas music playing softly, delicious smells filling the air, the occasional burst of laughter from the living room. "Baby, is everything all right with you and Tobias?" I finally asked once we were alone. She froze for a split second before continuing to stir the gravy. "Of course, Mama. Why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know, just seem a little tense, that's all." She brushed it off with a practiced laugh. "It's just the stress of hosting Christmas. I want everything to be perfect." Perfect. That word again, the pursuit of perfection, can lead people down dangerous roads. Dinner was laid out beautifully. Golden turkey, cranberry sauce, my collard greens, yams glistening with brown sugar. Tobias carved with expert precision, complimenting Danielle on every dish. The children used their best manners. We said grace, holding hands round the table. But halfway through the meal, a wave of dizziness hit me. My chest tightened, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. Years of living with minor heart problems taught me to recognize the warning signs. "Mama, are you okay? You've gone pale," Danielle asked. Her fork paused midway to her mouth. "Just need some air, sweetheart. Don't worry." I stood carefully, my hand braced against the table. "I'll just step outside for a minute." "I'll come with you," she offered, starting to rise. No, enjoy your dinner. I'll be right back." The December air felt good against my hot skin as I stepped onto the back patio. I took deep breaths, willing my heart to settle into its normal rhythm. That's when I noticed the light spilling from beneath the garage door. Tobias was meticulous about turning off lights. He lectured the children about it enough times. Electricity costs money, and wasting money is foolish. Strange that he'd leave the garage lit up. Curious, I made my way along the stone path toward the 3-car garage. Maybe Tobias was looking for something, or perhaps the kids had been playing there earlier. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders, my breathing easier now in the cool air. The side door was unlocked. I pushed it open without thinking twice. The man in the hoodie wasn't supposed to be there. He was about 30, rough-looking, with a jagged scar running along his jawline. He stood at Tobias's workbench, counting stacks of bills into neat piles. Behind him sat 3 large duffel bags and that long black case with metal latches. Our eyes met. His widened with panic. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The case behind him was partially open, and I could clearly see what was inside. Guns. Not hunting rifles like Thomas used to own. These were handguns, arranged in rows, at least a dozen of them. I'm Danielle's mother," I managed to stammer. Before he could respond, the door connecting the garage to the house flew open. Tobias stood there, his face transforming from shock to controlled calm in the space of a heartbeat. "Mama Loretta, what are you doing out here?" His voice was friendly, but his eyes were cold as winter. I needed some air," I said, my gaze moving between him and the stranger, the money, the weapons. "What's all this, Tobias?" He stepped fully into the garage, closing the door behind him. His smile stayed fixed in place as he moved toward me, but everything about his body language had changed. The charming son-in-law was gone, replaced by someone dangerous, someone I didn't know at all. "It's not what it looks like," he said smoothly. "It looks like guns and cash," I replied, finding my voice again. "It looks like trouble." The stranger shifted nervously. "Tobias, we don't have time for—" "Shut up, Rick," Tobias snapped without looking at him. Then, turning back to me with that practiced smile. "Mama Loretta, this is just business, nothing for you to worry about." "Business? What kind of real estate business involves cash like that and guns?" He moved closer, placing his hands gently but firmly on my shoulders. "Listen to me. This is complicated, but I'm protecting our family. You understand family, don't you? Sometimes protecting family means doing things differently." The way he emphasized the word family sent a chill down my spine. "You need to go back inside now," Tobias said, his voice gentle, but his grip on my shoulders tightening. "The kids will be wondering where their grandmother went." The stranger, Rick, had quickly covered the money and closed the black case. He watched me with wary eyes, his hand hovering near his waistband. "Tobias, I'm not stupid," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Whatever you're involved in, it's putting my daughter and grandchildren at risk." Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe even respect. "Nothing is at risk. Everything is under control." "Then why all the secrecy? Why the guns?" He sighed, dropping the act just slightly. "The real estate market is complicated. Sometimes investments need Protection. That's all this is. That's not all this is, I countered. You're lying to my daughter, to your children. His expression hardened. Am I? Are you sure about that, Mama Loretta? The implication hung in the air between us. Was Danielle involved? Did she know? Go back inside, he repeated, guiding me firmly toward the door. We're having Christmas dinner, family time. Let's keep it that way. As we reached the door, he paused. And Mama Loretta, some things are better left undiscussed, for everyone's safety. I walked back into the house on shaky legs, my mind racing. The dining room fell silent as I entered. Danielle's eyes moved from me to Tobias, questions in them. Found Mama Loretta getting some air by the garage, Tobias announced cheerfully, as if nothing was wrong. You feeling better now? All eyes turned to me. Melanie and Ty watched innocently. Forks paused mid-bite. Danielle's gaze was more complex, worried, searching, perhaps even fearful. Much better, I lied, forcing a smile as I took my seat. The conversation resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. Tobias laughed too loudly at Ty's jokes. Danielle kept glancing between us. I pushed food around my plate, no longer hungry. After dessert was served, Tobias's phone buzzed. He checked it, then stood. Sorry, folks. Quick business call. He kissed Danielle's cheek before adding, Honey, can I see you in the kitchen for a second first? They disappeared together. I distracted the children by asking about their favorite presents, but kept my ears tuned toward the kitchen. Their voices were low, but tension carried through the walls. When they returned minutes later, Danielle's eyes were red-rimmed, though she smiled brightly. Who's ready for some Christmas games? While Tobias took his call in the office, Danielle organized a charades in the living room. As we played, her cheerfulness seemed forced. Whenever our eyes met, she would quickly look away. During a break in the game, when the kids were debating whose turn it was next, I leaned close to my daughter. Baby, if you're in trouble, you can tell me. Her smile faltered. Everything's fine, Mama. Is it? Because what I saw in that garage... It's not what you think, she cut me off, echoing Tobias's words exactly. Please, let's just enjoy Christmas. We can talk later. But the way her voice trembled told me everything I needed to know. My daughter was scared. Tobias rejoined us, his business apparently concluded. He slipped back into family mode seamlessly, suggesting we watch a Christmas movie together. The children cheered, argument forgotten. As we settled in the living room, lights dimmed except for the twinkling Christmas tree, I watched them all. My family, or what was left of it. Tobias, with his arm around Danielle, her body tense under his touch. Melanie curled against her father's side, trusting and unaware. Ty sprawled on the floor, surrounded by new toys. On the television, George Bailey ran through the snowy streets in Bedford Falls, rediscovering the value of his life. The irony wasn't lost on me. This perfect Christmas scene was a facade, hiding something ugly and dangerous. When Danielle got up to make hot chocolate, I followed her to the kitchen. Tell me the truth, I said quietly, making sure we couldn't be overheard. Are you and the children safe? She busied herself with mugs and cocoa, avoiding my eyes. Of course we are. Tobias provides for us. He protects us. From what? I pressed. What does he need to protect you from? She finally looked at me, and I saw something in my daughter's eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, yes, but also resignation, like someone who had made a devil's bargain and was living with the consequences. Sometimes, Mama, we make choices. Sometimes to keep what you have, you look the other way. My blood ran cold. Danielle, whatever he's involved in. Stop. Just stop. You don't understand our life. You don't understand what it takes to give the kids everything they need. They need safety more than they need fancy toys, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Is everything okay in here? Tobias appeared in the doorway, his smile fixed, but his eyes calculating. We're just helping with the hot chocolate, I said, reaching for innocence I didn't feel. That night, lying in the guest bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed everything. The guns, the money, Tobias's veiled threats, Danielle's fearful eyes. What had my daughter gotten herself into? And more importantly, how deep was she in it? I thought about calling my pastor for advice, or maybe my late husband's brother. But something told me this situation required more than prayers or family counsel. This required action. Little did I know, the true extent of what was happening under this roof would be revealed in just a few hours, and it would force me to make a decision that would either save my family or tear it apart forever. Sleep refused to come that night. I tossed in the guest bed, listening to the house settle around me. The digital clock on the nightstand cast a red glow across the unfamiliar room, 11:42 p.m. Christmas was nearly over, but my unease only grew stronger with each passing minute. Around midnight, I heard it, the soft click of the front door closing. Not slammed, not even shut normally, deliberately quiet, like someone trying not to be noticed. I slipped from the bed and moved to the window, parting the curtains just enough to see outside. The security lights illuminated the circular driveway, and, to my surprise, Tobias stood there, phone pressed to his ear, breath clouding in the cold night air. His posture was different, no charm, no smile, just rigid purpose. He paced in tight circles, gesturing sharply with his free hand. Even from a distance, I could tell this was the real Tobias, not the man who called me Mama Loretta with practiced affection. As I watched, headlights swept across the property. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows rolled silently up the driveway, lights cutting off before they fully stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was no late-night Christmas visit from friends. Tobias greeted the drivers with quick handshakes. 4 men emerged from the vehicles, broad-shouldered figures moving with practiced efficiency. One was the stranger from earlier, Rick, his scar visible even in the dim light. They spoke briefly before Tobias led them toward the side entrance to the garage. I needed to see what was happening. Pulling on my robe, I crept from the guest room, careful to avoid the 3rd stair that always creaked. The house was silent except for the hum of the heating system. I checked the children's rooms as I passed, both sleeping soundly, Christmas toys scattered across their floors. The door to the master bedroom stood half open. I glanced inside to find it empty. Danielle wasn't in bed. My stomach clenched. Was she part of whatever was happening in the garage? Moving through the darkened kitchen, I approached the door connecting to the garage. Pressing my ear against it, I heard muffled voices, the metallic click of what could only be weapons, the rustling of bags. I turned the knob slowly, easing the door open just enough to see through. The garage was transformed into a hub of activity. The SUV doors stood open, ready to be loaded. Tobias directed the operation like a conductor, pointing, nodding, checking items off a list on his phone. The men transferred items from the duffel bags into the vehicles with practiced efficiency. But what froze my blood was seeing Danielle, my daughter, stood near the workbench, counting stacks of cash into separate piles. Her hands moved quickly, confidently. She'd done this before. "We're behind schedule," Tobias said, checking his watch. "Border shipment is complete, but the Henderson order had a problem with the paperwork." "Fix it," Tobias snapped. "We need clean documentation or the whole operation falls apart." My mind raced to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't just some side hustle or great area real estate deal. This was organized crime happening in my grandchildren's home with my daughter's knowledge. Then I thought Tobias pull out a handgun from the waistband of his jeans. He checked the magazine, slammed it back in, and tucked the weapon away again. Anyone gives you trouble, you know how to handle it. I must have gasped because suddenly all movement in the garage stopped. 5 heads turned toward the door where I stood.
Looks like we have company, Rick said, reaching for his own weapon. Tobias raised a hand to stop him. It's just my mother-in-law, he said softly, dangerously. I backed away as he approached the door, but there was nowhere to run. He pushed it open fully, towering over me in the dark kitchen. You should be sleeping, Mama Loretta, he said softly, dangerously. What are you doing, Tobias? What have you pulled my daughter into? His eyes flicked toward the children's rooms upstairs. Let's not disturb everyone, shall we? Come in. Let me explain. I knew it was a mistake to follow him into the garage, but I needed answers, needed to understand what danger my family was in. The men watched me warily as I entered. Danielle wouldn't meet my eyes, her face a mask of guilt and defiance. Mama, oh, back to bed, she pleaded. This doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me? I felt anger rising through my fear. My grandchildren are sleeping upstairs while you're running some kind of weapons operation in their home? Tobias sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. It's a business, Loretta, a profitable one that keeps your daughter and grandchildren living very comfortably. It's illegal, I said flatly. So is betting on football games, but people do it every Sunday, he replied with a shrug. The difference is scale and profit. One of the men checked his watch. Tobias, we need to move. 5 minutes, Tobias replied, eyes never leaving mine. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Now, Mama Loretta, we have a decision to make. You can go back to bed, forget what you saw, and continue being part of this family. Or... He let the threat hang in the air. In that moment, I saw everything clearly. The expensive gifts, the perfect house, the way Tobias controlled everything and everyone around him. The fear in my daughter's eyes at dinner. My hand slipped into my robe pocket where my cell phone rested. My fingers found the emergency call button, the one that didn't require unlocking the screen. I choose my family, I said quietly. The real one, not whatever this is. I pressed 911 as Tobias stepped toward me.
911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was barely audible from my pocket, but in the tense garage, it might as well have been a thunderclap. Tobias's face transformed, shock giving way to fury. What have you done? He hissed. I pulled the phone out, hand trembling but voice steady as I gave the address. There are armed men in my daughter's garage, illegal weapons. Please hurry. Rick lunged toward me, but Tobias held up his hand. Don't. That would only make things worse. The next few minutes unfolded in a blur of frantic activity. The men scrambled to pack what they could back into duffel bags. Danielle stood frozen, color drained from her face. You've destroyed everything, Tobias told me, voice eerily calm despite the chaos around him. You have no idea what you've done. I'm protecting my grandchildren, I replied, something you should have been doing instead of bringing danger to their doorstep. His laugh was hollow. You think this is protection? Wait until there's no money coming in. Wait until they take the house, the cars, everything. See how protected they feel then. They'll have their parents, I countered, not in prison. A flash of movement caught my eye, Danielle rushing toward the stairs. The children! I have to get the children. For a moment, the criminal enterprise dissolved, and they were just parents again, Tobias and Danielle racing toward their sleeping children as red and blue lights began to flash through the windows. Police response in this neighborhood was remarkably fast. Within minutes, the quiet Christmas night erupted into chaos, sirens wailing, spotlights sweeping across the yard, officers shouting commands through megaphones. Police! Everyone out with your hands up! Melanie and Ty, bewildered and frightened, clung to Danielle as they came downstairs. Ty clutched his new teddy bear, eyes wide with confusion. What's happening, Grandma? Melanie asked, her small voice cutting through the commotion. Before I could answer,
Officers burst through the front door, weapons drawn. More came through the garage entrance, quickly surrounding Tobias and his men. Commands echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "Down on the ground! Hands where we can see them!" Tobias complied with unnerving composure, even as his men were forced to their knees. But his eyes, those eyes that had always unsettled me, never left mine. They promised something that made my blood run cold. The children screamed as their father was handcuffed. Danielle collapsed to her knees, holding them close, sobbing into Ty's pajama-clad shoulder. A female officer approached me. "Ma'am, are you the one who called this in?" I nodded, unable to tear my gaze from my devastated family. "Can you tell me what you saw?" I described everything, the weapons, the money, the late-night meeting. My words felt like betrayal with each syllable, but the truth had to come out. While I gave my statement, officers searched the house and garage. Their findings confirmed everything I reported and more. False-bottomed cabinets in the garage concealed additional weapons. A hidden safe behind the custom wine rack in Tobias's office contained documents with names, dates, and amounts. The operation was larger than I had imagined. As dawn broke over the shattered remains of our Christmas, Danielle finally approached me. Her face was streaked with tears, eyes swollen and red. "You did this," she whispered. "You destroyed our family." "Danielle, baby, this wasn't a family. This was a prison. You were living in fear." "I was living," she shouted, grief giving way to rage. "We had everything. The children had everything." I countered. "They had a father running guns out of their home. How long before that brought violence to your doorstep? How long before they got caught in the crossfire?" Her hand struck my cheek before either of us realized what was happening. The sting of the slap was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. "Get out," she hissed. "Get out of my house." An officer intervened. "Ma'am, I'm afraid no one can leave just yet. We need statements from everyone." Hours later, as Tobias and his men were taken away in separate police cars, I sat in the kitchen with a cold cup of coffee, watching social workers talk gently to my grandchildren. The Christmas tree still twinkled in the corner, presents scattered beneath it, a mockery of the holiday's promise. Danielle wouldn't speak to me. She answered police questions in monotone, signed paperwork with mechanical precision, and kept the children close as if afraid I might take them too. "Mrs. Gaines," a detective sat across from me, his face kind but tired. "Thank you for what you did tonight. Based on what we found, your son-in-law was running one of the largest illegal weapons operations in the county. We've been trying to track this network for months." I felt no satisfaction in his gratitude. "What happens now? To my daughter, the children?" He sighed. "We're still determining your daughter's level of involvement. The kids will stay with her for now, under supervision. But, Mrs. Gaines," he leaned closer, voice dropping, "this goes deeper than you know. The people Tobias was working with, they don't forgive betrayal easily." As he spoke, my phone buzzed with a text message from Jerome, my late husband's cousin. "Heard about Danielle. Coming to help. Will be there tomorrow." The detective continued talking about protective measures and future testimonies, but my mind latched onto a terrible question. How did Jerome know what had happened? The police hadn't released any information yet. And as I looked around at the wreckage of my daughter's life, a cold certainty settled in my bones. We hadn't reached the bottom of this nightmare yet. Not by a long shot.
The days following Christmas passed in a blur of police interviews and tears. Danielle and the children moved into a hotel temporarily while investigators combed through their house. I returned to my home alone, calls to my daughter going straight to voicemail. Jerome arrived, as promised, full of concern and offers to help. At 65, he still carried himself with the confidence that had made him Thomas's favorite cousin. His silver hair and warm smile usually brought comfort, but
Something felt off about his presence now. "Terrible business, Loretta," he said, sitting in my kitchen on the third day after Christmas. "How much did Danielle know, do you think?" "She says nothing," I replied carefully. "Claims she thought it was just business storage." He nodded too quickly. Of course, smart girl, our Danielle, always knew how to stay above the fray. His choice of words struck me as odd, but grief and exhaustion clouded my judgment. I was grateful for his support, especially when he offered to speak with his contacts about getting Danielle a good lawyer. A week after the arrests, I was finally allowed to retrieve some of the children's belongings from the house. The police escorted me inside the now empty home. Yellow evidence tape crossed doorways, fingerprint dust coated surfaces. The Christmas tree stood dried out and drooping, forgotten in the chaos. "Take what the kids need, but don't disturb potential evidence," the officer instructed. I gathered clothes, favorite toys, school books, trying to give Melanie and Ty some normalcy amid the destruction of their world. As I packed items from Danielle's bedroom for her, my hand brushed against something in her vanity drawer. Pushing aside makeup and jewelry, I found a small leather-bound book and an unfamiliar keycard. I shouldn't have opened it. Every moral fiber told me to respect my daughter's privacy, but the detective's words echoed in my mind. "We're still determining your daughter's level of involvement." The book was a ledger, neat columns of numbers, dates, and initials. No explicit descriptions, but the pattern was clear. Regular entries, large sums, coded references that even I could recognize as transaction records. My hands trembled as I flipped through pages dating back 3 years. This wasn't the record of someone who knew nothing. This was the work of an active participant. The key card bore the logo of a storage facility across town. I slipped both items into my purse before the officer could see. That evening, I drove to the hotel where Danielle was staying. She opened the door reluctantly, her face drawn and exhausted. "The children are asleep," she said flatly. "If you've come to lecture me—" I held up the ledger. Her face crumpled. "Where did—" "You knew," I said simply. "All this time, you knew exactly what Tobias was doing." She pulled me inside quickly, checking the hallway before closing the door. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "The walls here are thin." We stood facing each other in the small hotel room. Through a partially open door, I could see my grandchildren sleeping, Ty's arm thrown protectively over his sister even in slumber. "How long?" I asked. Danielle sank on the edge of the bed, deflated. 3 years, since we almost lost the house. What happened? Tobias made some bad investments. We were underwater on the mortgage, drowning in debt. The perfect life was about to collapse. Her bitter laugh held no humor. Then Jerome introduced him to some business associates, said they could help. My blood ran cold. "Jerome? Your father's cousin Jerome?" She nodded. "He said it was just storage and transport at first, moving merchandise across state lines, no questions asked. The money was—" She swallowed hard. "It was so much, Mama. Enough to save everything." "But it didn't stop there," I prompted. "It never does." She looked up, eyes hollow. "By the time I realized what kind of merchandise it was, we were too deep in. They had photos of the kids at school, Mama. They made it clear there was no walking away." I sat beside her, my anger giving way to horror. "Why didn't you come to me? We could have gone to the police together, found protection." "Protection from what? From whom?" She interrupted. You don't understand how far this reaches. Police, judges, businessmen, they're all connected. Tobias was just a middle manager in something much bigger. She took the ledger from my hands, flipping to the back pages. See these initials? JG? That's Jerome Gaines, Dad's precious cousin. He's not just connected to this, he helped build it. The floor seemed to drop from beneath me. Jerome, who consoled me at Thomas's funeral, who had been like a brother to me for 40 years, who sat in my kitchen just days ago offering help. That's why he came to town so quickly after the arrests, I whispered, connecting the pieces. He's not here to help. He's here to contain the damage. Danielle nodded, a single tear tracking down her cheek. And to watch me, make sure I don't talk. That's why I couldn't call you back. They're always listening. I pulled her into my arms then, this child of mine who had made terrible choices, but who was also a victim of circumstances I couldn't fully comprehend. What do we do now? I asked, the weight of this new betrayal settling heavy on my shoulders. She knows nothing, she admitted. But Mama, there's something else you should know. Something worse. She reached for her phone, pulled up a text message, and handed it to me. It was from Jerome, sent that morning. Family dinner tomorrow night. Need to discuss Tobias's situation. I'll bring food for the kids. The seemingly innocent message carried a clear threat. He was closing in, preparing to ensure their silence. He never brings food, she whispered, as holding my daughter, feeling her shoulders shake with silent sobs, I realized that my 911 call on Christmas night hadn't ended the nightmare. It had only exposed the first layer of darkness that ran through my family like poison. And Jerome, the man I'd trusted most after Thomas, was at the center of it all.
2 months after that fateful Christmas night, winter had released its grip on Georgia. The first dogwoods bloomed outside the courthouse where I sat, waiting to meet with the district attorney. Danielle and the children had been staying with me since late January, after Jerome's true nature became impossible to ignore. The night after I discovered Danielle's ledger, Jerome had indeed shown up at her hotel room, bringing food that remained untouched. His concerned uncle act lasted exactly 17 minutes before he revealed his true purpose. The organization is concerned about Tobias, he'd said while the children were in the bathroom, about what he might say to reduce his sentence. Danielle had recorded the entire conversation on her phone, evidence we immediately took to the detective handling the case. Within days, Jerome was arrested, his own home revealing documentation that made Tobias look like a small-time player by comparison. But the true extent of Jerome's betrayal only became clear in late February when Tobias requested to speak with Danielle. Despite my objections, she went to the county jail, protected by both her lawyer and a detective. She returned to my house pale and shaking. "Mama," she whispered once the children were asleep, "it was Jerome. All of it was Jerome." Now, sitting in the courthouse hallway, I replayed what she'd told me that night. How Tobias had met Jerome at our family reunion 6 years before he even met Danielle. How Jerome had identified Tobias as someone ambitious and moldable, a perfect front man for their operation. How he'd orchestrated the chance meeting between Tobias and Danielle at that charity event. He used me to give Tobias legitimacy, Danielle had explained through tears. Jerome knew a family man selling real estate would draw less attention than the actual players. He helped Tobias court me, encouraged the marriage, and even pushed him to have children quickly. My own flesh and blood, my husband's beloved cousin, had orchestrated a sham marriage for my only daughter to facilitate his criminal enterprise.
The prosecutor's door opened, interrupting my thoughts. "Miss Gaines, we're ready for you now." Inside, the district attorney laid out evidence that turned my stomach. Photos of Jerome at my husband's funeral, consoling me while simultaneously texting his associates. Records showing how he'd manipulated Thomas's life insurance policy, diverting funds to seed his operation. Documents proving he'd been using our family connections for decades to build his network. We believe Jerome Gaines has been operating this weapons trafficking ring for at least 15 years. Your son-in-law was just one of several front men. But here's the truly disturbing part. Jerome appears to have specifically targeted families of law enforcement officers and court officials. She slid a photograph across the desk. It showed Jerome with his arm around Thomas at his police academy graduation 42 years ago. Your husband's position in the sheriff's department gave Jerome valuable intelligence and protection. We found similar patterns with at least 6 other families. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Thomas, my honorable, straight-arrow husband, had unknowingly provided cover for his cousin's operation for decades. Had Jerome been at our wedding, calculating how to use our marriage? At Danielle's birth, seeing a future pawn? Every family moment suddenly felt contaminated by his presence. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Tobias has agreed to testify against Jerome and the larger organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. With your daughter's recordings and ledger, plus Tobias's testimony, we have enough to put Jerome away for decades." As I left the courthouse, spring sunshine felt at odds with the winter in my heart. The man who had held my hand at my husband's funeral, who had read scripture at the funeral, who had promised Thomas he'd look after our girls, that man had been planning our exploitation even as he wiped away my tears. Phone calls from old friends and family members had dwindled to nothing once Jerome's arrest made the news. People I'd known my whole life suddenly couldn't look me in the eye, either from shame at being fooled themselves or from lingering doubts about my family's involvement. Driving home to Danielle and my grandchildren, I realized we were now truly alone, cut off from our past, but finally free from the web of lies that had ensnared us for years. The man who consoled me at my husband's funeral was the architect of our downfall. But in exposing him, we had found a terrible truth that might, eventually, set us free.
Summer came to Georgia with its relentless heat and afternoon thunderstorms. 6 months after Christmas, justice finally began to take shape. Jerome's trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sitting straight-backed in the gallery as the man I'd trusted for 40 years was revealed for what he truly was. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony, surveillance footage, and most damning of all, his own meticulous documentation of the criminal enterprise. Tobias testified for 4 days, looking smaller without his expensive clothes and practiced charm. He never once looked at me, but his eyes sought out Danielle whenever she attended. I couldn't read the messages that passed between them in those glances. Regret, perhaps, or mourning for the life they'd pretended to have. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. Jerome was sentenced to 32 years without possibility of parole. At 65, it was effectively a life sentence. Tobias received 12 years, with potential parole after 8, his cooperation earning him leniency the prosecutor hadn't initially offered. The other members of the operation received various sentences, some heavier than others depending on their level of involvement and willingness to cooperate. Danielle was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony and the evidence she provided. The prosecutor concluded she had been manipulated and threatened into complicity rather than being a willing participant. Not everyone agreed with this assessment, but I thanked God daily for this mercy. Our lives settled into a new rhythm. Danielle and the children moved permanently into my home, the big house with its empty rooms finally filled with voices again, even if those voices sometimes cried in the night. Melanie and Ty adjusted as children do, with resilience that amazed me. Their school counselors reported they were doing well considering the circumstances. They asked about their father occasionally, and Danielle answered with age-appropriate truth. Daddy had broken laws and needed to face consequences, but he still loved them. Financial restitution came in the form of seized assets being partially returned to Danielle as an unwitting victim. It wasn't wealth, but it was enough to provide stability and eventually fund the children's education. Rebuilding trust between Danielle and me took longer. Some nights we sat on the porch swing after the children were asleep, trying to process the betrayal that had shaped our lives without our knowledge. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed. How could I not have known what Tobias really was? She confessed one evening. Fireflies blinking in the yard beyond us. We see what we're prepared to see, I replied, thinking of Jerome's decades of deception. And they were expert manipulators. Slowly, painfully, we reconstructed our relationship on foundations of brutal honesty. No more secrets, no more looking away from uncomfortable truths. It was harder, but healthier. 1 year after that Christmas night, Danielle enrolled in nursing school, a dream she'd abandoned when she married Tobias. The children thrived in their new school, and I found unexpected purpose volunteering with families of incarcerated people, offering empathy no one had initially extended to us. The shattered pieces of our family were reassembling into something different but genuine, a mosaic stronger at its broken places than the perfect illusion had ever been. 2 Christmases have passed since I made that 911 call. This year, our tree is smaller, the presents fewer but more meaningful. Danielle strings popcorn garlands with the children while I bake pies in the kitchen. Simple traditions reclaimed from simpler times. Life has taught me lessons I never wanted to learn. Trust, once broken, rebuilds like a bone that's been fractured, slowly, painfully, but often stronger at the healed break. The perfect family we pretended to be was hollow at its core. The imperfect, honest family we're becoming holds more true joy than all those picture-perfect Christmases combined. People still ask why I made that call, knowing it would tear my family apart. They wonder if ignorance might have been kinder for the children, for Danielle, even for me in my remaining years. Sometimes in dark moments, I've wondered the same. But then I see Melanie laughing openly again, free from the tension that used to hover in that beautiful house. I watch Ty developing his own moral compass, questioning and learning instead of simply obeying. I observe Danielle discovering her authentic self beneath the role she was manipulated to play. And I know that truth, however painful, was the only gift that truly mattered. The night I stumbled into that garage, I faced the hardest choice a mother and grandmother can face: protect the comfortable lie or defend the painful truth. In choosing truth, I lost the family I thought I had, but found the family we were meant to be. Love without honesty is like a house built on sand. It may look magnificent for a season, but it cannot withstand life's inevitable storms. That Christmas night taught me courage comes in unexpected moments, in the trembling finger that dials 911, in the voice that speaks truth when silence would be easier, in the heart that chooses right over comfortable. If you find yourself facing such a choice, between loyalty to a destructive secret or commitment to a difficult truth, choose truth
The path will be harder, the loss is real, but on the other side waits the possibility of genuine peace that no beautiful lie can ever provide. And lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment.